Why did Saudi clubs suddenly start spending billions to buy up the world's best football players? In just a few years, the Saudi Pro League went from an obscure regional competition to signing Cristiano Ronaldo, Neymar, Karim Benzema, and a wave of players right in the prime of their careers. We're talking contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars a year. It felt like overnight, the entire center of gravity in world football had shifted to the Middle East. But the real reason they're doing this, it isn't what you think. The obvious answer is money, and for the players, sure, it's about generational wealth. When you're offered a tax-free contract that multiplies your European salary by 10, you take the flight. But for Saudi Arabia, this isn't just a handful of billionaire owners playing real-life football manager. In fact, the clubs aren't really acting alone. If you look closely at the sudden spike in transfers, you realize there is a massive unified machine pulling the strings behind the curtain. It all started with Cristiano Ronaldo. When he signed with Al Nassr, critics laughed. They called it a retirement tour. But for the Saudis, Ronaldo wasn't just a striker, he was a proof of concept. Within weeks, the Saudi Pro League went from being broadcast in a few local markets to being shown in over 130 countries. He brought the cameras, the sponsors, and the credibility. He showed other players that it was safe to make the jump. But Ronaldo was only phase one of a much larger blueprint. To understand what's actually happening, you have to look at the PIF, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. It's a sovereign wealth fund worth over $700 billion. In the summer of 2023, the PIF took majority control of the 4 biggest clubs in Saudi Arabia. They centralized the strategy. This is all tied to a government mandate called Vision 2030. The Saudi state knows their massive oil wealth won't last forever. The world is shifting. To survive the future, they have to turn their country into a global hub for tourism, business, and entertainment. But building an organic sports league takes a century. The Saudis don't have a century, so they decided to buy one off the shelf. There's a domestic secret most fans miss completely. 70% of Saudi Arabia's population is under the age of 35. Historically, wealthy young Saudis left the country to spend their money on entertainment in Europe. The government wants to keep those billions inside their own borders. By bringing the biggest stars to Riyadh and Jeddah, they are building a domestic economy. Add to that a national health crisis, high rates of diabetes and obesity, and bringing elite athletes to the country is part of a desperate push to inspire a sports culture. But as the league grows, so does the backlash. You can't talk about Saudi sports without talking about sports washing. Human rights groups argue that buying up football is a calculated distraction, a way to launder the country's reputation beneath a highlight reel of spectacular goals. Saudi officials push back. They argue this is purely economic diversification. They point out that Western nations have used sports to build soft power for decades. Whether it's a distraction or a business plan, the reality is that it's working. People point to China's football a decade ago, which collapsed overnight, and say Saudi Arabia will fail exactly the same way. But China's spending was driven by private real estate companies drowning in debt. Saudi Arabia's spending is direct state policy, backed by one of the largest piles of cash on planet Earth. They aren't just buying football players, they're buying relevance in a post-oil world, and they have the money to ensure that, this time, the game really has changed forever. If you're into football stories that get deeper the more you look, hit subscribe.